Welcome back. If you've listened to me for any length of time, you know that I would say whatever your problem is, Jesus is the answer. But that can just be a religious cliche. What does that mean? Jesus is the answer. It depends on what your problem is. Um, if you have psychological trauma, Jesus is the answer. But again, what does that mean? That means a number of things. But I have somebody on today who I'm going to speak about that with. He is Dr. Tim Murphy, former congressman, psychologist, Navy veteran. He's written a book called The Christ Cure. Dr. Tim Murphy, welcome.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
This is big stuff. So tell my audience, what is this book that you've written?
Well, I recognize that trauma affects about 70% of the population, and we usually think of PTSD as something that soldiers have, but also first responders, policemen, firefighters, paramedics, frontline medical people who work in emergency rooms and burn units, but it really can affect anyone. When we face a life-threatening situation or major upheaval in our life, like a divorce, a financial disaster, a diagnosis of a terrible illness in a child. But what's happening is we have a society that has become softer. Everybody seems to want a diagnosis of attention disorder or gender dysphoria or obsessive compulsive disorder or spectrum or depression or anxiety. And look, there are real psychological concerns. But what happens is we're getting worse as a society because we're only looking to perhaps the latest meditation fad or going to see a counselor, which can be valuable, but forgetting about faith. And here's the bottom line. We know that those who regularly practice religion, not just have some kind of esoteric belief, but regularly practice religion, number one. And number two, do something spiritual and religious at least 4 times a week. Their prognosis and their improvement in the area of psychological concerns, particularly depression, anxiety, PTSD, their prognosis is far, far improved. And now some try and write it off as, well, that's just because they're taking time every week in quiet meditation or they're hanging around other people. That's not it. There is a role that the Lord plays at studying the issues in the Bible, those principles in the Bible, not just as stories, but understanding them has a massive impact. In my field as a psychologist, Eric, most psychologists identify themselves as agnostic or atheist. And yet most people who go to see a counselor who are themselves believers want their counselor to talk about it. And then the other thing is among clergy, about 85% of clergy say, I have no training in this. I'm not sure what to do. I'll give you a Bible quote or I'll talk to you about it. And so my book is written as a handbook for the broken and those who love them, and as a guide for clergy and counselors to understand that nexus between biblical and religious teachings and psychological principles to get towards healing. So that's why I wrote this book.
What I say over and over is that when we're talking about faith in the God of the Bible, ladies and gentlemen, this is reality. We live in a world, as Dr. Murphy has just said, that pretends that it's not reality, but it is reality. And so if you live in a world and you insist on a secular model for everything, you're going to get stuff wrong. You're not going to be able to succeed. And again, this is just something that works itself out practically, even if you don't believe it. I mean, Benjamin Franklin and many of the founders observed that religious communities were more able to be self-governing. So even if you didn't believe what they believed, you'd say, but people who are crazy about Jesus, they seem to be able to govern themselves better than people who aren't. They just would observe this. I remember David Wilkerson, when he started Teen Challenge and World Challenge and to help drug addicts, the government, this has to be, I think, in the 70s, did a huge study because they had tremendous success in their programs, which were totally Jesus-based, totally faith-based. And the government report called it the X factor because they had no explanation. They simply knew that people who believed in Jesus and worked the program that way had radically, like 10 times greater success rates. You see this in prison when you have prison ministry, recidivism rates dramatically different. So, Dr. Murphy, what we're talking about here, of course, is reality, but we live in a world that pretends like this is just something that you're interested in, and maybe it works for you, but it's not based in reality. But you have seen it work in dealing with people who have trauma, and that's why you've written this book about it.
Absolutely. Time and time again, I've seen it among soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who have struggled with terrible scenes, or as a paramedic once told me, the worst day of your life is every day for me, or a cop who told me, I cannot unsee the things I've seen. But what happens is there's lots of psychological techniques to calm down your system, which is the fight or flight mechanism, and that's true. But healing is a whole nother matter for us, and it is getting through that. It's interesting you said that about Franklin. I'm sure you know John Adams said that our Constitution was designed for people of faith. It's inadequate for anybody else because people of faith have something to reach towards. It isn't just hope as a concept. There is something over the horizon that they are fully aware of. We are fully aware of. And that can help us. Look, I've had struggles with my own issues with depression and alcoholic father and abuse and things like that. But healing comes from saying, I've got to forgive myself, forgive other people too, let the Lord forgive, unburden ourselves with that, and then really embrace and surrender ourselves to faith and trust and grace. These things are concepts that secular counseling cannot teach, and a secular world cannot be there. As you know, there's literally thousands and thousands of books on bookshelves about how to make your life better, whether it's selling more products or just feeling better. And those that have to do with faith are the ones that can really make a big difference in people's lives. Constantly, research teaches this.
Well, so this book, of course, with the title "The Christ Cure," I don't think you're overselling it because you know you've lived this and you see that this is real and it works. Who did you write the book for, basically?
Well, for those people who are struggling and still trying to find a way, the full title of the book is The Christ Cure: 10 Biblical Ways to Heal from Trauma, Tragedy, and PTSD. And so those folks who have faced trauma and tragedy are dealing with the debilitating symptoms of PTSD, which can be depression, it can be high levels of anxiety, sleep problems, problems with relationships, broken marriages, insomnia, the whole host of things that go with that. And people who continue to struggle with that, I want them to know there is a way that has been proven for a couple thousand years. Now, my book doesn't get preachy, so although I know a lot of folks in prison ministry and even football coaches who use it as their Bible study, but it is saying, in particular, tracking the life of the Apostle Paul, how we learn lessons from this. And instead of dismissing them and say, well, that's old stuff that's written thousands of years ago, is recognizing it's relevant to us today. So the person, for example, who just feels, I cannot get better. Well, Jesus came towards the lame man at the waters of Bethesda and said, do you want to walk? He didn't say, let me have some compassion for you. I'll say a little prayer over you, walk away and hope things get better. He really said, you got to make a decision here. And it is a matter of the faith. And how many times Jesus said, your faith has saved you. It's believing, it's part of that. Now, I don't want to dismiss psychological counseling as a method. It is important. There are many counseling methods which are very valuable to help people heal. But we know that those who are involved in the faith base just do much better. So those folks who are still struggling was who the book was written for.
Now, you talk in the book also about your own depression. You just referenced it. This is something that you have lived yourself.
Yeah, it's not fun. It is a point where depression is a lot of anger turned inward, where we just feel there's not a lot of hope. Keep trying various kind of things to get out of it. My thing, I kept striving and thinking, well, if I just achieve one more thing, maybe I'll get there. And my resume looks really good. I've written books. I was a state senator. I was a U.S. congressman. I passed the definitive mental health legislative reform in the country. But each time I was struggling. I joined the Navy while I was in Congress because I recognize being in Congress is not the most functional place in the world. And I wanted to help people. And so I did those in the Navy too, working as a psychologist. But each time feeling I'm not there, I'm not happy, I'm not satisfied. And having those struggles and trouble relating to people in ways that that was fulfilling. I was doing a lot of things with faith and doing a lot of things with my work, but depression continued to eat away at my life and really messed up a lot. With struggling with my marriage and other aspects too. And it was really a matter when I finally said, that's it. I have got to change. I mean, backs against the wall. This is it. Or I should say, not just backs against the wall, but toes on the edge of the bridge, where you're saying you got to make some changes. And that's where it made a difference for me.
When we come back, we'll be talking about that. Folks, I've been clear. I have struggled with these issues as well, and it is not fun. It's very real. It's terrible. Jesus is the answer. But the question is, what does that mean? That's what we're talking about. We'll be right back. Folks, welcome back. The book is The Christ Cure. Dr. Tim Murphy is the author, Navy veteran, psychologist, former member of Congress. And you've lived this, Dr. Murphy. This is real. What led you to say, I need to write a book about it? Is it just that you think that there are people out there who don't know how to get help, or they don't know about this? They're not hearing about this?
Well, Eric, I don't want this to sound somehow like, tongues of fire came on me. I'm not saying that, but from my own purpose, my own healing, I literally sat down on my keyboard and said, I'm just going to write every day and write about struggles and healing. And these things came out. I would read everything I could get my hands on about the Apostle Paul, recognizing that he was, if someone should be a patron saint of folks with trauma, it should be him. I mean, he was beaten with rods 3 times. He was stoned and left for dead. He was given 39 lashes 5 times. He was run out of towns, had to escape, tried. The whole list goes on for him. But says, well, what was it about him that did he have PTSD or not? And what I found out, Eric, was that nobody had written a book about it. Nobody had written a book about why Paul didn't collapse. Why was he not suicidal and alcoholic and philandering and gambling and the whole list of problems that go on? And what I recognize is these are the things we need to do. We need to build up our personal resilience. We need to be resistant in the battle, what he called it, continuing to endure and persist. We had to have a method of recovery, and we had to renew, as he said in Romans 12:2, to transform by renewing of the mind. So as I'm writing, more of this is coming to me. I'm no biblical scholar. It was just coming as I wrote and organizing and editing and building this up. So that's where it came from. And I would, in my work with my own clients, I would be talking to them about these concepts, and it became clear that using these things could be transformative for people's healing. So that's where it came from. I just typed the letters, so any mistakes are mine. But the truth is there, I'd say, from the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Well, look, the point is this works. And that's why, again, I'm, just a big part of my life is this thesis that we live in this secular culture, which is ridiculous. It really is like saying we live in a culture we're never going to talk about math. We're anti-math, but we're going to try to live and build buildings and do everything. But we're going to put this thing to the side. That would be crazy. And it would cause a lot of trouble. And that's kind of the situation we're in with the secular culture. The idea that you could live without God, or without even postulating God as a part of reality, and following his will as being a part of the reality in which we live, causes a lot of problems. And of course, mental health is at the heart of it. So let's talk about some of the things that you do talk about in the book. You said there are 10 specific things. Let's just touch on some of them.
Well, so the first one is one of resilience, and that is certainly everybody who's been in the military understands this. But throughout the book, I say you have to make choices. And under resilience, for example, you're building strength versus weakness. You're building a community around you versus being alone. You choose to understand what solitude is. Those are all very important. The other one is, the next one is resilience. This is where you're choosing courage over succumbing to fear, where you recognize you need humility. Humility is really important in that if you want to change, you have to be humble. I remember when I was working with the Navy SEALs teams, and I had asked the commander of one of the units, of SEAL Team 6 of all, and said, what is the number one personality trait you look for in people who want to be part of SEAL Team 6? He said, humility, because they have to understand what their limitations are and what they can do. The vigilance is also important there for resilience, for resistance. The next one is in recovery. And this is where you have to have what's very important is choosing guilt over shame. Now, that's really important. And we think, why would you want to choose guilt? Because shame means I'm broken beyond repair. God made a mistake when God made me. Guilt means I made a mistake. I'm taking responsibility. I will reconcile that. I'll do what I have to do. Under shame, there's nowhere else you can go. But another choice under recovery is forgiveness. And forgiveness is there's three parts, these six simple words. God forgives, others might, I must. And people who are really struggling with, maybe it's a self-inflicted trauma or something else, they say, I'm being punished for this, or why would God do this? It's important we have to be able to forgive ourselves. But many people think, I can't, and what I did was too bad. And I understand that through all this, God forgives us anyways, and has done that, and will do it again for us. And if we're holding out for the forgiveness of others, we may not get there. You know this, Eric. You may say something to someone, they may hold a grudge for decades. And at some point, you have to say, I got to shake the dust off my sandals and move on. But this fourth stage of renewal, and I quote again Romans 12:2, to be transformed by renewing of the mind, is I call these the not so secret secrets that Paul told us about. You have to really accept faith in God. You have to really accept trusting God and really accept the grace and the love, and then have a mission in life, a purpose, because, the Great Commission, Jesus said, it wasn't like, okay, you believe, you guys can all go home now. Jesus continually told people, you got things you got to do. You got to love one another. You have to work at this. You have to heal. You have to do all these things. So those parts there are very faith-based, but on all the things I described throughout the book, I talk a lot about what are the psychological principles, how does this work. But these other parts too, and I use this acronym FASTER: fitness, attitude, sleep, training, eating, relaxation. Real quick. Fitness.
Actually, hang on. We're going to go to a break. When we come back, I want to hear about that. We'll be right back. Welcome back, talking to Dr. Tim Murphy. The book is The Christ Cure. So you were just laying out an acronym for us, Dr. Murphy. Go ahead with that. Repeat that if you would.
Sure. The acronym is the word FASTER. People want to heal faster. So here it is. It's fitness, attitude, sleep, training, eating, relaxation. Real quick. We know that people who are physically fit, cardiovascular activity, strength training, that stimulates the brain to heal, the actual generation of new brain cells and connections between them, because there's this thing called brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is released when you're working out. And you got to create new connections in your brain, or otherwise you stay stuck in the ruts of where things were. Another thing is, when you are working out, it burns off the stress hormones of cortisol or cytokines or other things that are eating away, cause inflammation in our body, directly relate to anxiety and depression and insomnia. These things, we know that actually works better than medication for mild to moderate depression. Attitude are the mental attitudes we have, which can be self-defeating, irrational. I'm no good. Nothing will be good for me. I can't make it in life. Everybody should do what I want them to do. And all these faith-based beliefs, too, which are all the core of a lot of this changing. Sleep is important because we know people get regular sleep of about 7 to 9 hours a night. It gives the brain time to heal every night. The body needs, the brain needs that time every night to flush out stress hormones and a lot of waste. Otherwise, it builds up to tau proteins and early dementia and cognitive decline. Sleep is critically important, but people with a lot of trauma have trouble sleeping. So we make recommendations in the book of what you can do about that. So fitness, attitude, sleep. T is for mental training. The brain has to stay active. And a lot of times, Eric, if you've had times of depression, you just want to shut down. It's hard to keep thinking. We don't want to do anything. People become sedentary. Just flip the TV on and binge watch something or do nothing. That is not good. And so I always recommend people master something you already know, get better at it, and take on something you don't know. This activity of the brain is very powerful. And that's why people are not that involved in biblical work. Read the Bible, study it, and you'll learn lessons in there, but it's also stimulating your brain to make connections. The next one is healthy eating. There's thousands of books out there on what to eat right and what diet to use, and, you get rid of the processed foods, et cetera. As it turns out, the healthiest diet seems to be the Mediterranean diet. And let's see, who used to eat the Mediterranean diet? St. Paul. Also Paul, he had the olive oil and the fresh fish and all those foods were so very important. So I tell people, get rid of the foods that are causing harm to your body, and relaxation is both meditation, those quiet times to calm your body down, not be overstressed, not always be reaching for your phone or technology, and also mindfulness, just being fully aware of what's around you. Now, those two things in meditation and mindfulness, there's the best meditation is prayer. And being mindful, I tell people, get to a church, get to a place of worship. And sometimes the best thing to do is just sit there and be aware and listen to God, and let God listen to you. But be quiet during those times. That daily healing process of religious practice, those things are powerful. So add them all together. These are the principles that they don't come from me. They don't just come from science books. They really come from the Bible and teachings we've known for thousands of years. But we got to put them into practice.
So who do you think would most benefit from this book? I mean, it seems like most people would, but I guess you're saying that a lot of people are walking around with various degrees of trauma. They've seen things, they've lived things, and somehow they're crippled inside as a result of that. Now, I would often say that people flat out need deliverance. Doesn't matter whether you're a Christian. A lot of people have psychic wounds that demonic entities would attach themselves to. Do you get into that in the book? It doesn't sound like you touch on that stuff.
Well, I do somewhat. I mean, evil is real. It's out there, and we shouldn't deny it. And so that is very, very important in the context of that. That's a very important part of healing, particularly when I talk about vulnerability. We are all vulnerable to sin again. We are all vulnerable to weakness. Every day in our life, we reach for the apple of the tree in the Garden of Eden and bite it and wonder what went wrong. So you have to be very vigilant to that, because when we're weak, evil sees the doors wide open and comes swinging in. And our society today, especially in the last administration, taught that's what it was. I mean, you think of the number of children whose bodies and lives were ruined by psychologists saying, "Oh, you must have gender dysphoria." And I remember talking to psychologists too, to saying, "Well, what do you do about issues of religion?" "Well, we counsel the kids on that." "Well, are you a believer?" "No." "Well, then what do you counsel them?" "Well, that God loved everybody." Yeah, yes, true. And Jesus loves everybody, but he also said, but you got to change. And telling kids and telling other people, that's what it's all about. I think those are other voices of evil where in our nation, in our world, we've gone down those directions. So for people who are struggling and trying to find a way, I want them to understand this is a book of compassion, but it's also a book that sets out the demands, the rules that the Lord set up for us. He didn't just say, sit back, that's it, you're good. He said, you got to work at this. But in working at this, we can get better. And that's why I say, when I list my own struggles in the book, and I don't get into too much whining and that stuff, but I say it was a very difficult book to write, but a very hopeful book to read, because it tells people we can all get better.
Well, it's a big deal. And I think people they want a how-to. And I think that's part of my criticism of the modern church is it dispenses platitudes. It'll say Jesus is the answer. And they think, okay, what does that mean? Can you break it down for me? Well, Jesus loves you. Well, what does that mean? Please explain it to me. You have to live it. And I think that a lot of evangelicals in particular, they have become so fixated on the idea that we're not saved by our works that they then leap to the next level of a lie and say, therefore, I don't need to do anything. I'm good. I believe in Jesus. And folks, that is theologically not just wrong, but deeply harmful. You have to work the program. You have to, if you go into AA, they don't say, hey, there's nothing you have to do. There's things that you have to do. But if you do those things, you'll be blessed. So you're talking about that. And we're out of time, but Dr. Murphy, it's just great to get you on here. Thanks for writing the book, folks. The book is The Christ Cure. I think we've said enough about it that you get the basics, but I think we've long needed a primer, so to speak, on how to live in the times in which we live with the difficulties that most of us have. Just grateful that you've written the book. Dr. Murphy, thank you so much.
Can I just mention my website is drtimmurphy.com, drtimmurphy.com. And I do a lot with the book, podcasts, and other writings. People follow up. Please be in touch. Thank you so much, Eric.
drtimmurphy.com, drtimmurphy.com. Thank you so much.
God bless.